Hello everyone, this is Christy Haig with a class for you on how to fit a photograph into a frame while you're digital scrapbooking. First of all, I'm going to tell you that I'm using this wonderful kit called Live Free by DDE, and I used that kit to create this layout right here. And I now have a picture of my daughter holding her umbrella that I want to put inside of this blue frame. Of course, you'll notice that if I put the frame right over the picture, that the picture is too big, that there are parts of it that are hanging off the edges, which is not what we want. A lot of beginning scrapbookers will try to just make the picture smaller so that it fits inside of here. But you'll notice that as soon as I make it short enough to fit, it's no longer wide enough to fit. And if I were to make it wider, it distorts the picture. So that's obviously not what we want. So instead, we're going to show you two ways that you can cut away the outside of this picture so that it fits in the frame. First of all, we're going to start by using the rectangular marquee tool, which is right here. And we're going to go ahead and just actually cut away part of the picture. Now I can do it piece by piece by selecting the top part and cutting it, and then selecting the side and then selecting the bottom. Or I can show you this little shortcut way, which is what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the rectangle to actually make a selection around the part of the picture that I want to keep. Now the way I did that was I clicked my mouse right up here, clicked and held it down, and dragged it to select that area. Now I'm going to go up to the select button here, and I'm going to choose inverse. What inverse is going to do is it's going to select every part of my page that is not all currently selected. So instead of selecting just this photo, it's going to select everything around it, but not this part of the photo. So when you hit inverse, you'll notice that the marquee tools now go around the whole page except for this part right here. So what I'm going to look at next is make sure that this photograph is selected in my layers palette, because if I'm going to cut away the rest of the photograph, I want to do it to the photo, not to the frame or to the paper or anything else that's on my layout. And then I'm going to go up to edit and cut, and you'll notice that the rest of that photograph, all the parts that were hanging off the edge, all the parts that were not in this middle area were cut away. And you can see in the layers palette over here that they're actually entirely gone. Now, the nice part about this is it's really quick and easy to do. The drawback to this method is that those pixels are now entirely gone, and I can't get them back without reopening the picture and starting over again. So if, for example, I decided, hey, I really would like the umbrella to be more in the middle of the frame instead of at the top of the frame, the part of the picture that was up here is gone, and I can't make it come back. So I'm going to show you a little bit longer method, but that one that is not destructive, one that will let my photos still remain, just be hidden, so that if I wanted to change the way the picture is in the frame, I can do that later. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm actually going to go back to my layers palette and select the frame itself. And I'm going to use a different marquee tool. This one's called the Magic Wand. And with the frame selected here, I go onto my layout and I click inside the middle of this frame, and it's going to select everything that's exactly like what I'm clicking on. So it's going to select this whole empty area. What I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to go up and I'm going to go to select, modify, and expand. And I'm going to go ahead and expand 5 or 10 pixels. Pixels are really tiny. They're the tiny little dots of color that are in this layout. And you'll see that it's going to get just a tiny bit bigger. You see how it's just a little bit bigger? The reason I do that is I'm going to make a new square that actually fills this frame, and I want to make sure that it really fills it and not just goes to the edge where I'm going to sometimes see a pixel in between. So in the layers palette, I'm going to click this button right here, which is to create a new layer. And I'm going to go ahead with my paint bucket tool. I'm going to click again right inside of this square, and it's going to fill this whole area in a new layer, not on one of my other layers, with paint. I can then go select, deselect, and get rid of the marquee tool. Go back to my move tool, and you'll see now that this is just a square that fills this part of the frame. Now what I want to do is actually drag it in my layers palette underneath the frame because I don't want my picture hanging over the edges like I had before. And then I'm going to take my photograph and I'm going to put it over this image and I'm going to clip it to that image. So that is Command G in Windows or Apple G in a Mac. And that clips my photograph to this shape right here. Now the cool thing about that is you'll see in the layers palette that the whole photo is still there. So if I want to drag it around, the whole photograph is there. Or if I wanted to make her smaller in the picture or bigger in the picture, I can do that as well. So I'm going to get it exactly the way I want, and I'm going to leave it there. Now just for the sake of moving things around on my layout, I'm going to go ahead and click on the frame here and hold the Shift key down and click on this, and that will highlight all three of these layers. And I'm going to click on my link tool here, and that links them together. Now that I have it exactly the way I want it, I can move the picture anywhere around the page. Now because I did this non-destructive method, I didn't actually cut away part of the photo, I can always come back and unlink them together and move it around entirely on its own if I wanted to change the way the picture is in the frame again. Go ahead and select them and link them all again, and I'm going to put it where I wanted it on my layout. So it was here, and I wanted to actually drag it down to, see if I can find where that text is. There it is. To right underneath where I dated it. Put it here, and I'm going to go ahead and rotate it a bit. All right. So before we finish the class, I want to show you a couple of tips about shadowing. So we're going to talk about three different ways that we can shadow this. And I just realized I want my dates to be rotated. I'm going to go back and do those together. This is a quick tip for you on rotating things. Again, I can select a whole bunch of layers and rotate them together, and that way they'll all be at exactly the same angle. All right, back to shadowing. So one super easy way is just to take the Polaroid frame and go ahead and add a shadow. What I'm going to do for a shadow is actually copy the layer style from another layer and go ahead and paste it onto my frame and then adjust it the way I want it here. So you'll notice if I do this that it's shadowing just the frame, and so it's got a shadow that's on the outside of the frame, but also right up here it's got a shadow that's over the picture. So that's one very nice way of shadowing it if you want it to look like the frame is actually sitting above the photograph. Now, if you don't want it to look like the frame is sitting above the photograph, and you want it to look like the photo is actually part of the frame, like an actual Polaroid photograph, you can go ahead and you can click on all three of these layers, and we're going to merge them. Now, once I merge them, I can no longer edit each part individually like I was showing you with the photograph. So again, this is a destructive method. So if you were going to go this way, I would wait until you are entirely done with your layout. You're sure that you like it the way it is. Then you can go ahead, select those layers just like I showed you with the shift, and go to merge layers. That puts all of this into one layer. This is now exactly one thing and it can't be switched. But I can go ahead then and paste my shadow on it, and you'll notice as I edit it that it is the entire block. I'm not getting this shadow right over here on top of the picture. So those were two options for shadowing. I'm going to show you one more way. This is sort of a compromise between the two. The look that I want on this page is I want it to look like the frame is over top of the photo, but I want it to look like the photo is pretty close to the frame and that together they are showing more shadow here. And let me show you what I mean. I'm going to go ahead and paste the shadow on the frame like I have. And this is the way I want it to look right here. But I want a bigger shadow on the outside where the frame is hanging over these paper strips. But if I go ahead and make that bigger shadow there, I'm going to get a bigger shadow up here as well, and that's not what I want. I want to keep this shadow close because I want it to look like the photograph is really close to the frame, that the frame is sitting just a tiny bit above the photograph. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add this shadow. Then I'm going to go ahead and merge these layers. So I've got the top one selected, I hold the Shift key down and I click the bottom layer and it selects all of them. I'm going to go ahead and merge those layers. Now again, that was a destructive way, but you'll notice that this time I merged after the shadow, and so the shadow is part of this image now. Again, this part of the shadow can no longer be changed because I have merged them together. They are part of that image. But now I can add a new shadow to the whole thing, and I can make this one a much bigger shadow. So now I'm just adding shadow to the outside because this whole image is one solid image with the shadow already part of it. Now I can click OK, and there I have my layout exactly the way I want it. Thanks for coming along with me on this class of fitting a photograph inside of a frame.